A hidden portrait, a forgotten twin, a truth that changes everything. Sir, those twins ate scraps at the orphanage. 6 simple words that shattered a billionaire's world. When little Clara pointed at the golden frame, Vincent Ashford never imagined the photo of 2 smiling boys would unlock a past he didn't know existed. Who separated them? Where is his brother now? And why does this 6-year-old girl hold the key to a conspiracy that spans decades? Before we begin this incredible journey, type love in the comments and tell us where you're watching from. Let's see how far this story reaches. The crystal chandelier cast dancing shadows across the mahogany-paneled study as Vincent Ashford reviewed quarterly reports, his sharp gray eyes scanning numbers that would make most men dizzy. At 35, he'd built Ashford Industries from a small investment firm into a multinational empire worth $3 billion. His 3-story mansion in Greenwich, Connecticut, stood as a monument to his relentless ambition, every room decorated with priceless art and antiques collected from around the world. But tonight, Vincent couldn't focus on the spreadsheets before him. Something felt off, like a whisper at the edge of consciousness that demanded attention. He loosened his silk tie and walked toward the bay window overlooking the manicured gardens, where fountain lights illuminated perfectly trimmed hedges. 20 years of building this empire, and yet lately, an inexplicable emptiness gnawed at him. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Mr. Ashford? Patricia Coleman, his longtime housekeeper, stood at the doorway. The 62-year-old woman had worked for him for 15 years, maintaining the household with quiet efficiency. I'm terribly sorry to bother you, sir, but my daughter Clara is here. The babysitter canceled last minute, and I couldn't leave her alone. She'll be quiet, I promise. Vincent turned, ready to express his usual preference for boundaries between work and personal matters, when he saw her. A tiny figure clutching a small wicker basket, wearing a worn pink hoodie and a gray knit hat despite the mild spring evening. The child couldn't have been more than 6 years old, with wide hazel eyes that seemed too knowing for her age. Her clothes were clean but clearly secondhand, patched at the knees, a stark contrast to the opulence surrounding them. It's fine, Patricia, Vincent heard himself say, surprising even himself. Something about the child's serious expression intrigued him. Just this once. Clara stepped into the study with careful, measured steps, as if she understood she was entering a sacred space. Her small fingers gripped the basket handle tightly while her eyes wandered across the room, taking in the leather-bound books, the marble fireplace, and finally settling on something behind Vincent. Sir? Her voice was barely above a whisper, trembling slightly. That painting. Those boys. Vincent followed her gaze to an ornate golden frame hanging on the wall beside his desk. It was one of the few personal items he displayed, though he rarely looked at it anymore. The photograph showed 2 identical boys, perhaps 3 years old, with bright smiles and matching sailor outfits. They stood in front of what appeared to be an institutional building, their small arms wrapped around each other. What about it? Vincent asked, his tone sharper than intended. Clara walked closer, standing on her tiptoes to get a better view. Her basket swung gently at her side. Those twins, she said slowly, her young voice carrying an inexplicable weight. They ate scraps at the orphanage. I remember Miss Patricia talking about them when we'd visit the old building before it closed. She used to work there, and she told me stories. They said one of the brothers disappeared and the other one. She turned to look directly at Vincent, her hazel eyes unnervingly steady. The other one got adopted by rich people who wanted to forget he ever had a brother. The room seemed to tilt. Vincent's hand gripped the edge of his desk, knuckles white. What did you just say? Patricia rushed forward, her face flushed with embarrassment. Clara? You can't just say things like that to Mr. Ashford. I'm so sorry, sir. She doesn't understand. No. Vincent raised his hand, silencing her. His heart hammered against his ribs as memories he'd buried for decades began clawing their way to the surface. Let her speak. Clara, how do you know about that photograph? The little girl tilted her head, studying him with an intensity that seemed impossible for a 6-year-old. Miss Patricia used to take me to St. Margaret's Home for Children before it closed 2 years ago. She worked there when I was little. The old building had pictures on the walls, and Miss Patricia would tell me stories while she worked. She talked about the Ashford twins. She pointed at the frame. "That's you, isn't it, sir? And your brother?" Vincent felt the blood drain from his face. The Ashford twins. He'd spent 30 years trying to forget that phrase, to bury the fragmented memories of a life before the adoption. His adoptive parents, Harrison and Constance Ashford, had told him he was an only child, that his memories of a brother were just childhood fantasies, dreams that meant nothing. "That's impossible," Vincent whispered, but even as he spoke, he knew it wasn't. The nightmares that plagued him since childhood always the same. Two small boys huddled together in a cold room, promising never to leave each other, a hand pulling them apart, screaming. Then nothing but darkness and the sterile smell of his adoptive parents' mansion. Clara set her basket down on the Persian rug and reached into it, pulling out a crumpled piece of paper. "Miss Patricia doesn't know I took this from the boxes when St. Margaret's closed. I thought someone should know the truth." She held it out with trembling hands. Patricia gasped. "Clara, you can't just take things. Mr. Ashford, I'm so sorry." "This is completely inappropriate. Show me." Vincent's voice cut through the room like a blade. He took the paper from Clara's small hands, unfolding it carefully. It was a photocopy of an old admission record from St. Margaret's Home for Children, dated March 15th, 1994. His eyes scanned the faded text. Admission date, March 15th, 1994. Children, Vincent Michael Thomas and Nathan Michael Thomas, twins, age 3. Parents, deceased. Status, available for adoption. Notes, brothers must be kept together per parents' final wishes. Vincent's hands shook as he read the last line again. Brothers must be kept together. Nathan, he breathed, the name emerging from somewhere deep in his buried past. Images flooded his mind, sharing a bunk bed, splitting a cookie in half, holding hands through thunderstorms. Nathan's laugh, Nathan's tears when they were separated. "I had a brother named Nathan." Clara nodded solemnly. "Miss Patricia told me the old staff lady said a rich couple came and only wanted one twin. They said it broke the rules, but somehow the adoption went through anyway. They said money can make people forget what's right." She looked down at her worn sneakers. "They said Nathan cried for weeks calling for his brother. And then one day, years later, he just disappeared from the system. Nobody knows where he went." Vincent sank into his leather chair, the quarterly reports forgotten, his empire meaningless. For 31 years, he'd believed the lie. His adoptive parents had erased half of his identity, convinced him his memories were fiction. How much had they paid to separate twins? What kind of people did that? "Mr. Ashford?" Patricia's voice was gentle now, concerned. "Should I call Dr. Morrison?" "No." Vincent's mind was racing, shifting from shock to determination. He'd built a $3 billion empire by solving impossible problems, by finding answers where others saw dead ends. "Patricia, take Clara to the kitchen and get her something to eat." "Clara." He looked directly at the little girl. "Thank you for your courage in telling me this. You may have just given me back something I didn't know I'd lost." As Patricia guided Clara toward the door, the child looked back over her shoulder. "Sir? One more thing Miss Patricia told me from the old staff. They said Nathan had a birthmark, a small crescent moon on his left wrist. They said if you ever found each other, that's how you'd know for certain." Vincent's hand involuntarily moved to his own left wrist, where an identical crescent-shaped birthmark had always resided. A matching set, proof that they were two halves of the same whole. The study door closed softly, leaving Vincent alone with the photograph and a truth that shattered everything he thought he knew about himself. Somewhere out there, Nathan was alive. His brother had spent 31 years in a system that had failed him, while Vincent lived in luxury, unaware. He pulled out his phone and dialed his head of security. "Marcus, I need you to find someone. I don't care how long it takes or what it costs. I need to find my brother." The next morning, Vincent stood in front of the bathroom mirror at 5:30 a.m., unable to sleep after Clara's revelation. Dark circles shadowed his gray eyes, evidence of a night spent poring over every document he could find about St. Margaret's Home for Children. The facility had closed 2 years ago due to funding issues, its records scattered across various state agencies and private storage facilities. Marcus Sterling, his head of security and closest thing to a friend, had arrived at the mansion by 6 a.m. with preliminary findings. The former Navy SEAL sat across from Vincent in the breakfast room, his laptop open, his expression grave. "The trail is complicated, Vincent," Marcus said, scrolling through documents. "St. Margaret's kept poor records, especially in the 90s. But I've confirmed the basic facts. You and Nathan Michael Thomas were admitted as toddlers after your biological parents died in a car accident. You were there for approximately 1 year before the Ashfords adopted you." Vincent's coffee cup rattled slightly as he set it down. "And Nathan?" "That's where it gets murky. According to what I could piece together, Nathan remained at St. Margaret's until he was 11. He had behavioral issues, foster placements that failed, multiple returns to the facility. Then, at age 14, he aged out of the primary system and was transferred to a group home in Hartford." Marcus paused, his jaw tightening. "After that, the trail goes cold. No graduation records, no employment history, no permanent address. It's like he vanished." "People don't just vanish," Vincent said flatly. "Someone knows something. There's another problem." Marcus pulled up a scanned document. "I found the adoption paperwork for your case. Your adoptive parents didn't just adopt you, Vincent. They specifically requested the records be sealed and any mention of Nathan be removed from your official documents. They paid a lawyer named Gerald Hutchinson $50,000 in 1995 to ensure Nathan's existence was legally erased from your life." The words hit Vincent like a physical blow. $50,000 to erase a brother. To condemn a 3-year-old to believe he was alone in the world. Harrison and Constance died years ago, but Hutchinson isn't. "Find him." Marcus nodded. "Already located him. He's 78, retired, living in a nursing home in Massachusetts. I can have us there by noon. Make it happen." 2 hours later, Vincent found himself walking through the sterile corridors of Sunrise Assisted Living Facility, his expensive Italian shoes silent on the linoleum floors. The smell of antiseptic and overcooked vegetables permeated the air. Marcus walked beside him, having already smoothed the way with the facility administrator through a generous donation. Gerald Hutchinson sat in a wheelchair by a window overlooking a small garden, his once imposing frame now frail and bent. But his eyes, when they fixed on Vincent, still held a sharp intelligence. "Mr. Ashford," Hutchinson's voice was thin but steady. "I wondered if this day would ever come. You look just like your mother did. Your biological mother, I mean. She had those same gray eyes." Vincent pulled up a chair, sitting directly in front of the old lawyer. "You remember my biological mother?" "I remember everything about that case. It haunted me for years." Hutchinson's gnarled hands twisted together in his lap. "Your adoptive parents, Harrison and Constance Ashford, they were clients of mine for decades. Wealthy, influential, desperate for a child after years of failed fertility treatments. When they saw you at St. Margaret's during a charity visit, they wanted you immediately. But there was a problem," Vincent said coldly. "I came with a brother." Hutchinson's eyes closed briefly. "They only wanted one child. They had their reasons, they said. A single heir, no complications, no rivalry. They believed raising twins would dilute their attention and resources. I tried to talk them out of it. I told them it was wrong, that separating twins could cause psychological damage. But Harrison Ashford was not a man who accepted no for an answer." "So you helped them do it anyway?" Vincent's voice was ice. "I did. God forgive me, I did." Hutchinson's hands shook. Harrison paid off the orphanage director, a woman named Doris Kent. She falsified records, claimed the twins were actually unrelated boys who simply looked similar. The state social worker was overwhelmed with cases and didn't dig deeper. Once the paperwork was filed, you became an only child legally. Nathan remained in the system. Marcus leaned forward. "Did you keep tabs on what happened to Nathan?" Hutchinson nodded slowly. "For a few years, yes. Guilt made me check. He struggled terribly. Attachment disorder, they called it. He couldn't bond with foster families because he was waiting for his brother to come back. By the time he was 9, he'd been through 6 failed placements. I heard he became angry, distrustful. The last report I saw said he'd run away from a group home at 16 and never came back. Vincent stood abruptly, walking to the window to hide the emotion threatening to overflow. His brother had spent years waiting for him, believing he'd been abandoned. While Vincent attended private schools and summer camps in Europe, Nathan had been alone, damaged by a separation engineered by greed and selfishness. "Is there anything else you can tell me?" Vincent's voice was strained. "Anything that might help me find him now?" Hutchinson was quiet for a long moment. "There was one thing. About 5 years ago, a private investigator came asking questions about the Ashford adoption case. Said he was working for someone trying to locate family members. I didn't give him anything. I was bound by confidentiality, and frankly, I was a coward. But I kept his card." He gestured weakly toward a small desk in the corner. Top drawer, in an envelope marked Ashford. Marcus retrieved the envelope, pulling out a business card for Crawford Investigations with a local phone number. He held it up to Vincent. "Thank you, Mr. Hutchinson," Vincent said, turning back to face the old lawyer. "I hope you find the peace you're looking for. But understand that what you did destroyed 2 lives. Mine and Nathan's. I know." Hutchinson's voice broke. "I've lived with that knowledge every day for 31 years. If you find him, please tell him I'm sorry. Tell him an old man's regret means nothing, but it's all I have to offer." Vincent and Marcus left without another word, emerging into the bright midday sunshine that seemed wrong given the darkness of what they'd learned. In the car, Marcus immediately called the number on the investigator's card. "Crawford Investigations. This is Thomas Crawford speaking." "Mr. Crawford, my name is Marcus Sterling. I'm calling on behalf of Vincent Ashford regarding an investigation you conducted 5 years ago into the Ashford adoption case." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. Vincent Ashford, the CEO, I thought. I assumed he didn't want to be found. Vincent grabbed the phone from Marcus. "This is Vincent Ashford. Who hired you to look for me?" "Sir, I'm bound by confidentiality. I'll pay you double whatever you were paid then. Triple. Name your price." Vincent's voice was steel. "Who was looking for me?" Crawford hesitated. "It was a man named Nathan. He didn't have a last name on file, had been living off the grid for years. He came to me with what little money he'd saved, said he was trying to find his twin brother who'd been adopted by a wealthy family. He had a photograph, same one you probably have. 2 little boys in sailor suits. He had the admission records from St. Margaret's." Vincent's heart was pounding. "When was this, and what did you tell him?" "August 2020. I tracked you down easily enough, you're a public figure. But when I called your office, your assistant said you didn't accept unsolicited contact and had no interest in matters related to your childhood. I reported back to Nathan that you declined contact." The words were like a knife to Vincent's chest. 5 years ago, Nathan had tried to reach him, and his assistant had turned him away without Vincent ever knowing. "I never got that message. I never knew he was looking for me. I'm sorry, Mr. Ashford." Nathan was devastated. He'd spent years saving money for that investigation. When I told him you weren't interested, he just shut down. Said he should have known better than to hope. "Where is he now?" Vincent demanded. "Do you have any way to contact him?" "The last address I had was a homeless shelter in New Haven, but that was 5 years ago. He could be anywhere now if he's—" Crawford trailed off, not finishing the thought. "If he's still alive." The unspoken words hung in the air. Vincent closed his eyes, fighting the wave of emotions threatening to drown him. Nathan had been so close, had reached out, and had been turned away by a corporate firewall that Vincent had built to protect himself from distractions. "Mr. Crawford, I need you to do something for me. I need you to find my brother again. Use every resource you have, I don't care about the cost. Find Nathan and tell him I've been looking for him too. Tell him I never stopped being his brother. I just didn't remember. I'll start immediately, Mr. Ashford. And sir, for what it's worth, I hope you find each other. That man never stopped believing you were out there somewhere." As Marcus drove them back to Greenwich, Vincent stared out the window at the passing landscape, seeing nothing. 31 years of separation. 2 lives torn apart by greed. And 5 years ago, a missed connection that could have changed everything. But there was still time. There had to be. Vincent had found Nathan once before in that orphanage, two small boys clinging to each other. He would find him again. When they arrived back at the mansion, Patricia was waiting with Clara in the entrance hall. The little girl held a rolled-up piece of paper in her hands, her expression serious. "Mr. Ashford," Clara said quietly, "I did a drawing of what Miss Patricia told me Nathan looked like when he was older, from the old photos at St. Margaret's. I thought maybe it could help." She unrolled the paper, revealing a child's crayon drawing of a man's face. It was surprisingly detailed for a 6-year-old's work. The face showed sharp gray eyes, dark hair, and a thin, haunted expression. At the bottom, Clara had written in careful letters, "Your brother Nathan, he's still looking for you." Vincent took the drawing with trembling hands, staring at a face that could have been his own reflection, aged by hardship and loss. This was what his brother had become while Vincent lived in comfort. This was the price of his adoptive parents' selfishness. "Thank you, Clara," Vincent said softly. "You've given me more than you know." That night, Vincent sat in his study with Nathan's drawing pinned to the wall beside the old photograph. Two boys in sailor suits smiling without a care, and one haunted face marked by years of abandonment. Marcus had mobilized every resource at their disposal. Private investigators were combing homeless shelters, rehab facilities, and low-income housing across Connecticut and neighboring states. They were searching hospital records, arrest reports, and any database that might contain a trace of a man who'd fallen through society's cracks. But as Vincent stared at the two images side by side, one thought consumed him. When he found Nathan, would his brother even want to be found? Would Nathan hate him for living a life of privilege while he suffered? Would the bond they'd shared as toddlers be enough to overcome 31 years of separation? And beneath those questions lay one even more terrifying. What if they were too late? What if Nathan was gone and Vincent would spend the rest of his life knowing he'd had a brother he never got to save? A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Patricia entered with a cup of tea, setting it gently on his desk. "Sir, Clara wanted me to tell you something else before she went to bed. She said from the stories I told her, Nathan used to talk about you to the other kids at St. Margaret's. She said he told them he had a brother who was going to come back for him someday. He never stopped believing." Patricia's words broke something in Vincent. For the first time since he was 3 years old, he allowed himself to cry. For the brother he'd lost. For the years they'd been stolen from them. And for the desperate hope that it wasn't too late to make things right. Somewhere in the darkness beyond his mansion walls, Nathan was out there, and Vincent would tear the world apart to find him. 3 days of intensive searching had yielded fragments of Nathan's life, pieces of a heartbreaking puzzle that Vincent assembled in his study late into each night. The portrait that emerged was devastating. Marcus stood before Vincent's desk with a thick folder of findings. "We tracked Nathan through the system until 2016. Multiple arrests for petty theft and trespassing, all dismissed or resulting in minimal sentences. He cycled through various shelters in Connecticut and Massachusetts. No permanent residence, no steady employment. There are gaps in the record where he completely disappears for months at a time." Vincent studied the documents with growing horror. A mug shot from 2014 showed a man who looked like his twin, but aged by a decade of hard living. The same gray eyes Vincent saw in the mirror every morning stared back from that photo, but filled with an emptiness that made his chest ache. "There's something else," Marcus continued carefully. "I spoke with a social worker named Helen Rodriguez who worked with Nathan intermittently from 2010 to 2018. She remembered him clearly, said he was intelligent, articulate when he trusted you, but deeply damaged by abandonment issues. He refused long-term help because he didn't believe anyone would follow through. She said he carried that old photograph everywhere, the one of you two as children. Did she say where he might be now?" "She lost contact with him in 2018 after he refused to enter a residential treatment program. But she gave me names of people who knew him, places he frequented." Marcus pulled out a map marked with various locations throughout New Haven. "There's a community center on Elm Street where homeless individuals gather for meals. The director, a man named Pastor Williams, said a person matching Nathan's description sometimes comes by. Hasn't seen him in 2 months, but it's a start." Vincent stood decisively. We're going there tonight. Vincent, you can't just walk into a homeless shelter. Let me send a team. No. Vincent's voice was firm. If Nathan is there, he needs to see me. Not investigators, not security personnel. Me, his brother. They arrived at Hope Community Center just after 7 p.m. The building was a converted warehouse, its brick exterior weathered but clean. Through the windows, Vincent could see long tables where dozens of people sat eating from plastic trays. The scene was so far removed from his world of boardrooms and galas that he felt like he'd stepped onto another planet. Pastor Williams met them at the door, a broad-shouldered man in his 50s with kind eyes and a firm handshake. Mr. Ashford, I understand you're looking for someone. Come with me. He led them to a small office cluttered with donation boxes and paperwork. On the wall hung photos of community members, success stories of people who'd gotten back on their feet. Vincent's eyes scanned each face, searching. Nathan doesn't come regularly, Pastor Williams said, settling into a worn chair. But when he does, he's different from the others. Keeps to himself, doesn't make trouble, doesn't ask for extra help. He eats, sometimes showers, and leaves. The few times I tried to talk with him about programs or housing assistance, he shut down completely. When did you last see him? About 10 weeks ago, March 15th, actually. I remember because it was the anniversary of when those old records show he first entered the system. He mentioned it briefly, said it was the day everything changed. Pastor Williams pulled out a logbook. He signed in that day, which he doesn't always do, just his first name, like always. Vincent's hands clenched. March 15th was the same day he and Nathan had been admitted to St. Margaret's 31 years ago. Nathan had remembered the date, had marked it alone in a homeless shelter. Pastor Williams, if he comes back, will you call me immediately? Vincent pulled out his personal card, writing his cell number on the back. Please don't tell him who's looking for him, just call me. I need to be the one to explain. The pastor studied Vincent thoughtfully. I've seen a lot of reunions in this work. Most don't end the way people hope. Time and trauma change people. The brother you remember from childhood may not be the man you find now. I don't care what time has done to him, Vincent said quietly. He's my brother. That doesn't change. They spent the next 2 hours visiting other locations on Marcus's map. A public library where homeless individuals could stay warm during the day. A medical clinic offering free services. A park where people camped in tents. At each place, Vincent showed the age-progressed photo Marcus had created, based on Nathan's 2014 mugshot. Some people recognized him vaguely, others shook their heads. It was at the fourth location, a 24-hour diner called Rosie's on Chapel Street, where they got their first real lead. The night manager, a woman in her 40s with tired eyes, looked at the photo and nodded immediately. Yeah, I know him. Comes in sometimes around 3 a.m., orders the cheapest thing on the menu, makes it last 2 hours, leaves $1 tip even though he can barely afford the food. Never causes problems. She studied Vincent curiously. You a cop? He in some kind of trouble? No, I'm his brother. I've been looking for him. The woman's expression softened. Well, he was here last night, actually. Came in around 2:30, left just before 5. He looked rougher than usual, like he'd been sick or something. Vincent's heart leaped. Did he say anything about where he was staying? He never talks much, but I overheard him telling another regular that he'd found a squat over in the warehouse district, near the old train station. The city's planning to demolish those buildings next month, so people are camping there while they can. Marcus was already pulling up the location on his phone. It's about a mile from here, abandoned since 2019. They thanked the manager and headed out, Vincent's pulse racing. The warehouse district was a sprawl of decaying industrial buildings, tagged with graffiti and surrounded by chain-link fences with gaps torn open. Marcus had called for backup, 2 security personnel who followed in a second vehicle. Let me go first, Marcus insisted, as they approached the largest building. We don't know what condition he's in or how he'll react. But Vincent was already walking toward a side entrance where the door hung off its hinges. Inside, the space was vast and dark, broken only by shafts of moonlight through holes in the roof. Makeshift camps dotted the floor, People huddled in sleeping bags and under tarps. A man near the entrance looked up, his eyes wary. "You social services? Because we're leaving anyway when they demolish this place." "I'm looking for someone," Vincent said, showing the photo. "My brother. Has he been here?" The man studied the image, then pointed toward the far corner of the building. "There's a guy who looks like that, keeps to himself in the back. But he's not doing good, man. I think he's sick." Vincent's blood ran cold. He moved quickly through the warehouse, Marcus at his side with a flashlight. In the back corner, behind a stack of old pallets, they found a small tent made from a blue tarp tied to exposed pipes. "Nathan?" Vincent's voice cracked. "Nathan, are you in there?" There was a long silence, then a rustling sound. A thin hand pulled back the tarp edge and a face emerged into the flashlight beam. Vincent's breath stopped. It was like looking into a mirror that had been shattered and badly reassembled. The same gray eyes, the same sharp features, but worn down by decades of survival on the streets. Nathan's face was gaunt, his dark hair long and unkempt, his clothes layered and dirty. But it was the expression in his eyes that broke Vincent's heart, a mixture of disbelief, fear, and something that might have been hope before it was crushed too many times. "Nathan," Vincent whispered, lowering himself to his knees on the concrete floor. "It's me. It's Vincent." Nathan stared at him for a long moment, his breath coming in shallow gasps. Then his eyes focused on Vincent's left wrist, where the sleeve had pulled back slightly, revealing the crescent-shaped birthmark. You have the mark." Nathan's voice was rough, damaged from years of weather and illness. "They said. The investigator said you didn't want." "He was wrong. I never got the message. I never knew you were looking for me." Vincent moved closer, seeing now that Nathan was shivering despite the layered clothes, his skin pale and clammy. "Nathan, you're sick. Let me help you." "I don't need help from—" Nathan's words dissolved into a coughing fit that shook his entire frame. When he pulled his hand away from his mouth, Vincent saw blood on his palm. "Marcus, ambulance now." Vincent reached for Nathan, who flinched away. "Don't. I don't. I don't want your pity." Nathan's eyes were fierce despite his weakened state. "You got out. You got the good life. I don't need you showing up now like some savior. You're my brother." Vincent's voice echoed through the warehouse. "I was 3 years old. They took me away from you. They made me forget. But I never stopped being your brother, Nathan, never." Nathan's defenses crumbled. His body sagged and fresh tears cut clean tracks through the dirt on his face. "You forgot me. For 31 years you forgot I existed. They stole my memories, but you were always there. The nightmares, the feeling that something was missing, I never understood until now." Vincent carefully reached for Nathan's hand, relief flooding through him when his brother didn't pull away. The skin was burning with fever. "Please, let me help you now. Let me make up for 31 years. Let me be your brother again." Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. The other homeless individuals in the warehouse began gathering their belongings, preparing to scatter. But Nathan didn't move, his eyes locked on Vincent's face as if trying to memorize every feature. "I have your birthmark too," Nathan whispered, pulling back his own sleeve to reveal an identical crescent moon on his left wrist. "I used to trace it and pretend you were doing the same thing wherever you were. Stupid, right?" "Not stupid. Never stupid." Vincent's voice broke. "We're going to fix this. Everything that was stolen from us, we're going to take it back. Together." The paramedics arrived, and Vincent refused to leave Nathan's side as they loaded him onto a stretcher. His brother's hand clutched his with surprising strength, as if letting go might make Vincent disappear again. "Don't leave," Nathan pleaded as they lifted him into the ambulance. "Please don't leave me again." "Never," Vincent promised, climbing in beside him. "I'm your brother. I'm staying right here." As the ambulance screamed through the night toward Yale New Haven Hospital, Vincent held Nathan's feverish hand and made a silent vow. The people who had torn them apart, who had stolen 31 years of brotherhood for their own selfish purposes, would answer for what they'd done. But first, he would save his brother's life, whatever it took. whatever it cost. Nathan's eyes drifted closed as the medication the paramedics had administered began taking effect, but his grip on Vincent's hand never loosened. And in that moment, Vincent understood that finding Nathan was only the beginning. The real challenge would be healing wounds that had been bleeding for 3 decades, bridging a gap carved by greed and lies, and proving that the bond between twin brothers could survive anything, even 31 years of separation, even a lifetime of pain, because they were more than just brothers. They were 2 halves of the same soul, finally coming home. The fluorescent lights of Yale New Haven Hospital's intensive care unit hummed steadily as Vincent sat beside Nathan's bed, refusing to leave despite the doctor's assurances that his brother was stable. It had been 2 weeks since they'd found Nathan in that warehouse, and Vincent had barely left the hospital, sleeping in the chair beside his brother's bed, eating whatever Marcus brought him. Dr. Sarah Chen, the attending physician, had delivered the diagnosis with clinical precision but genuine concern. Nathan was suffering from pneumonia complicated by severe malnutrition and years of untreated health issues. His immune system was critically compromised. Without intervention, he wouldn't have survived another week on the streets. The first 72 hours were critical, Dr. Chen had said on day 3, reviewing the chart. His body was shutting down, but he's fighting now. It's going to be a long recovery, though. Months, not weeks. Vincent stared at his brother's sleeping face, so similar to his own yet marked by suffering Vincent could barely comprehend. Nathan's breathing had finally stabilized without the oxygen mask, though he still needed assistance. The hospital gown hung loosely on his frame, revealing collarbones that jutted sharply beneath pale skin that was slowly regaining color. Marcus entered quietly, carrying coffee and a bag of food Vincent hadn't requested but needed. "You have to eat something. Nathan needs you strong, not collapsed from exhaustion." "I can't stop thinking about the investigator's call in 2020, Vincent said, his voice hollow. "Nathan reached out and my assistant turned him away without even telling me. 5 more years he spent on the streets because of corporate protocol." "You didn't know," Marcus said firmly. "You can't blame yourself for what you didn't know." "Can't I?" Vincent's hands clenched. "I built walls around myself so high that my own brother couldn't reach me. I was so focused on protecting my empire that I became exactly like Harrison and Constance. Cold, unreachable, caring more about success than people." Marcus pulled up a chair beside him. "The difference is that the moment you learned the truth, you dropped everything to find him. Your adoptive parents knew about Nathan and chose to erase him. You didn't have that choice. Don't confuse their cruelty with your ignorance." A soft moan drew their attention to the bed. Nathan's eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, then sharpening as they landed on Vincent. For a moment, confusion clouded his features, as if he couldn't quite believe what he was seeing. "Still here," Nathan whispered, his voice still rough but stronger than 2 weeks ago. "Thought maybe I dreamed you." Vincent moved closer, his hand finding Nathan's. "I'm real. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." Nathan's eyes filled with tears. "They said, in the warehouse before the ambulance came. You said they made you forget me. Is that true?" "Yes." Vincent had spent 14 days preparing for this conversation, but now that it was here, the words felt inadequate. "Our adoptive parents, Harrison and Constance Ashford, they paid people to separate us and erase you from my legal history. They told me my memories of having a brother were just childhood fantasies. They convinced me I'd always been an only child." Nathan turned his head away, staring at the ceiling. "I remember the day they took you. You were crying, reaching for me. I tried to hold on, but the lady pulled us apart. You kept screaming my name, over and over. And then you were gone." His voice cracked. "I thought you'd come back. Every day for years I waited for you to come back." The raw pain in those words gutted Vincent. "I'm so sorry, Nathan. I'm so sorry for every day you waited, every night you were alone. If I could go back and change it—" "You can't," Nathan interrupted, his tone flat. "What's done is done. You got the mansion and the billions. I got the streets and the shelters. That's just how it worked out. That's not fair to either of us," Vincent insisted. "Neither of us chose this. We were children, victims of people who cared more about their perfect life than about doing what was right. Nathan was quiet for a long time, his breathing labored despite the improvement. Finally, he spoke again, softer now. "Tell me about them, our biological parents. Do you remember anything?" Vincent shook his head. "Nothing. I was too young when they died, but I hired investigators. They found records. Our father was Michael Thomas, worked as an electrician. Our mother was Sarah Thomas, she was a teacher. They died in a car accident on March 10, 1994. We were 3 years old." "Michael and Sarah," Nathan repeated, testing the names. "I wish I remembered them." "We'll learn about them together," Vincent promised. "I'm having researchers dig up everything they can find. Photos, records, where they lived, what they were like. We'll build the memory we should have had." A nurse came in to check Nathan's vitals, adjusting his IV and making notes on her tablet. When she left, Nathan's eyes tracked back to Vincent with an intensity that was almost painful. "Why are you doing this?" Nathan asked. "You could have just sent money, set me up in some apartment and gone back to your life. Why are you sitting here like you actually care?" "Because I do care." Vincent's voice was fierce. "You're my brother, my twin. We shared the same womb, the same first breath, the same heartbeat. That connection doesn't disappear just because someone tried to erase it. I feel it, Nathan, don't you? When I found you in that warehouse, it was like something in me that had been broken my whole life suddenly clicked back into place." Nathan's facade cracked. "I felt it too," he admitted. "But I'm scared to believe it. Everyone who was supposed to care about me, they all left eventually. Foster parents, social workers, friends I thought I had. Everyone leaves." "I won't," Vincent said with absolute certainty. "I promise you, Nathan, I will never leave you again." Over the next 3 weeks, as Nathan's condition slowly improved, Vincent began learning the full scope of his brother's life. It emerged in fragments, stories shared during the long hours when Nathan was awake enough to talk, but too weak to maintain his defensive walls. Nathan had been 11 when he ran away from his last foster home, unable to bear another pretend family. He'd survived on the streets through a combination of odd jobs, shelter stays, and the kindness of other homeless individuals who taught him how to navigate the system. He'd taught himself to read better using library books, had tried multiple times to get his GED but could never maintain stable housing long enough to complete it. The arrests Marcus had found were mostly for sleeping in places he shouldn't, taking food he couldn't afford, defending himself when threatened. Nothing violent. Nothing that suggested malice. Just a person trying to survive in a world that had given up on him. "I tried to find you once before the investigator," Nathan confessed on the 5th week, his voice much stronger now, though still raspy. "When I was 26. I remembered the name Ashford, remembered the big black car that took you away. I looked you up online at the library, found out you were the successful CEO. I stood outside your office building in Manhattan for 3 hours, trying to get the courage to go in." He laughed bitterly. "But I looked at my reflection in the glass, saw this homeless guy in dirty clothes, and I knew you wouldn't want anything to do with me. So I left." Vincent felt each word like a physical blow. "Nathan, I would have." "Would you have?" Nathan's eyes were sharp. "Be honest. If some random homeless guy showed up at your office claiming to be your long-lost twin brother, would the old Vincent have believed him? Or would security have thrown him out?" The question hung in the air. Vincent wanted to protest, to insist he would have known, would have felt the connection. But he'd been a different person at 26. Ruthless. Focused only on building his empire. Trusting no one. "You're right," Vincent admitted quietly. "The person I was then probably wouldn't have listened, but I'm listening now. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life making up for the years we lost." That afternoon, Patricia arrived with Clara, the little girl carrying a handmade get-well card covered in crayon drawings. Nathan watched warily as they entered, clearly uncomfortable with visitors. "Mr. Nathan," Clara said solemnly, approaching the bed with careful steps. "Miss Patricia and I made you a card, and I brought you something else." She pulled out a worn, stuffed bear from her backpack. "This was at St. Margaret's in the donation boxes when it closed. Miss Patricia saved it." She said it belonged to a boy who used to live there, someone who needed to remember he wasn't alone. I think it was yours. Nathan's hand trembled as he took the bear, his fingers tracing the faded fabric. Mr. Patches, he whispered. I forgot. I had this when I was little, before the foster homes, before everything. He looked at Clara with wonder. Thank you for keeping him safe. Clara nodded seriously. Miss Patricia told me lots of stories about the old St. Margaret's. She said you were smart and brave, and that someday your brother would come find you. I'm glad she was right. After they left, Nathan held the bear against his chest, and for the first time since Vincent had found him, his brother allowed himself to fully break down. The tears came in waves, years of accumulated grief pouring out as Vincent held him, both of them crying for the childhood stolen from them and the decades lost to lies. We're going to be okay, Vincent promised. Both of us. Together. But even as he spoke the words, Vincent's phone buzzed with a message from Marcus that made his blood run cold. Found something about the adoption and the biological family connection. You need to see this. It's bigger than we thought. Vincent met Marcus in the hospital's private consultation room, away from Nathan's recovering presence. His head of security looked grim as he spread documents across the table, each one marked with yellow highlighter and sticky notes. I've been digging deeper into the Ashford adoption case, Marcus began without preamble. The lawyer Hutchinson was just one piece. There was a whole network involved in separating you and Nathan, and the reason goes beyond Harrison and Constance just wanting one perfect heir. Vincent leaned forward, his jaw tight. What did you find? Your biological parents, Michael and Sarah Thomas, weren't just regular working-class people. Michael Thomas was the son of Jonathan Ashford, Harrison's father. Marcus pulled out a genealogy chart. Jonathan had a brief relationship with a woman named Ruth Thomas in the early 60s, before his marriage to Harrison's mother. He privately acknowledged Michael as his son in a sealed document but never publicly claimed him to avoid scandal. Which means Harrison was actually your biological uncle, not just an adoptive parent. The words didn't immediately register. Vincent stared at the chart, his mind struggling to process what Marcus was saying. That's impossible. Why would Harrison adopt his own nephews and then separate them? Why lie about the connection? Money, Marcus said flatly. Jonathan Ashford died in 1993, the year before your parents' accident. His will was unusual. Despite never publicly acknowledging Michael, Jonathan's private papers show he felt guilty about abandoning his son. He created a trust specifying that his entire fortune, at that time about $500 million, would be held in trust for all his biological grandchildren, whether publicly acknowledged or not. DNA verification was built into the trust terms. Vincent's head was spinning. So when Michael and Sarah died, Harrison saw an opportunity. If he could claim you as an adopted child rather than as Jonathan's biological grandson, with full knowledge of the connection, he could continue controlling the trust indefinitely as executor. But having two heirs complicated things. The trust document specified that Jonathan's wealth would be divided equally among all grandchildren at age 35. Harrison wanted it all under his control, and he wanted his own bloodline to eventually inherit through you. So he took me and abandoned Nathan. Vincent's voice was ice. He let his own nephew grow up on the street so he could steal money that wasn't his. Marcus nodded grimly. It gets worse. I found evidence that Harrison actively suppressed any attempts Nathan made to be recognized. That investigator Nathan hired in 2020. Harrison's lawyers, working for the estate even after his death 3 years ago, sent the investigator a cease and desist, claiming Nathan was trying to defraud the Ashford estate. They threatened legal action if he continued trying to contact you. Rage flooded through Vincent, white-hot and consuming. Everything he'd built, every success he'd achieved, had been funded by money stolen from his brother. The Ashford fortune that had launched his empire legally belonged to both of them. There's more, Marcus continued carefully. The trust was structured to release in full when Jonathan's grandchildren turned 35. Vincent, you turned 35 2 months ago. That money, almost $1.2 billion after decades of growth, it should have been released to you and Nathan to share equally. But the estate lawyers have been stalling the release, claiming they need to verify the trust terms. I think after Harrison's death, the remaining executors suspected you might eventually discover the truth about Nathan. Vincent stood abruptly, pacing the small room. Can we prove all this? Can we prove Nathan is Jonathan's grandson? DNA test would do it easily. You're identical twins, so if you're Jonathan's grandson, Nathan is too. The harder part is proving Harrison's fraud and getting the courts to recognize Nathan's right to his inheritance after all these years. But with Jonathan's private acknowledgement papers and the trust language about DNA verification, we have a strong case. We'll prove it, Vincent said with cold determination. We'll expose every lie, every document they falsified, every person they paid off. And Nathan gets what's rightfully his. Vincent, you need to prepare yourself for what this means. If Nathan is recognized as Jonathan's grandson, some people will say the adoption was fraudulent from the start, that you benefited from a conspiracy. I don't care. Vincent's voice cut through the air like a blade. I don't care about the Ashford name or their blood money. I care about my brother getting justice. Everything I have built with that seed money, I'll rebuild from scratch if I have to. But Nathan gets what's his. Marcus studied him carefully. You've changed, you know. The Vincent Ashford I started working for 5 years ago would have fought tooth and nail to protect his claim to that fortune. That Vincent Ashford didn't know he had a brother rotting in a warehouse while he lived in a mansion bought with stolen money. Vincent's hands clenched. I'm going to make this right, Marcus. Whatever it takes. They returned to Nathan's room to find him awake and sitting up, looking significantly better after 5 weeks of treatment. The color had fully returned to his face, and he was actually attempting the hospital food without grimacing. You two look serious, Nathan said, setting down his fork. What's wrong? Vincent pulled up a chair, taking a deep breath. Nathan, there's something I need to tell you. About our biological parents and the adoption. About why Harrison really separated us. Nathan set down his tray, his expression guarded. What now? They were actually serial killers? The accident was actually murder? Nothing that dramatic, but it's significant. Vincent explained everything Marcus had discovered, watching his brother's expressions cycle through disbelief, anger, and finally a cold fury that matched his own. So they weren't just random rich people who decided they only wanted one kid, Nathan said slowly. Harrison knew exactly who we were. He was our uncle. He took you to steal our inheritance and left me to rot so he wouldn't have to share. His laugh was bitter. And here I thought it couldn't get worse than just being unwanted. Turns out I was worth too much to acknowledge. Nathan, there's more. The trust Jonathan set up is supposed to release to his grandchildren at age 35. I turned 35 in September. You will in September too. Vincent leaned forward. That money should have been released to both of us already. It's worth over $1 billion, split equally. The estate lawyers have been stalling, but they can't hold it back anymore, not once we prove who you are. Nathan stared at him for a long moment. You're telling me I'm supposed to be a billionaire? Me? The guy who was sleeping in a warehouse 2 months ago? Yes, and we're going to get you every penny that's rightfully yours. Vincent's voice was steel. But I need to warn you, once we start this legal battle, everything will come out. Your life, my life, the separation, the fraud. It's going to be public and ugly. The media will tear into this story. Are you ready for that? Nathan's jaw set in a line that reminded Vincent of his own stubborn determination. Let them tear into it. Let everyone know what Harrison and Constance Ashford did. Maybe it'll stop them from doing it to other kids. He paused. But Vincent, what about you? Don't you lose something in all this? If people find out the adoption was fraudulent, I lose nothing that matters, Vincent interrupted. Everything I built with Ashford Industries, I built with my own work. The seed money might have come from Harrison's control of the trust, but the empire is mine. And honestly, I don't want a penny of that trust money. It's yours, Nathan, all of it. That's insane, it's half yours. It stopped being mine the moment I learned how it was obtained. Vincent's voice was firm. You spent 31 years paying the price for that money. You lived on streets while I lived in mansions. You went hungry while I ate at 5-star restaurants. You were alone while I had every advantage. That money is yours. Consider it partial payment for what was stolen from you." Nathan's eyes filled with tears. "I don't want your guilt money, Vincent. I want my brother. You have your brother. You've always had your brother, even when neither of us knew it." Vincent reached for Nathan's hand, gripping it firmly. "But you also deserve justice. You deserve to have what was stolen from you returned. Let me help you get it." Before Nathan could respond, the door burst open. A woman in an expensive suit strode in, flanked by two men in dark jackets. Her steel gray hair was pulled back severely, and her eyes were cold as they swept the room. "Mr. Ashford," she said crisply, her gaze fixed on Vincent. "I'm Margaret Thornton, legal counsel for the Ashford estate. We need to discuss your recent activities." Vincent stood slowly, positioning himself between the lawyer and Nathan's bed. "You're not welcome here. This is a private hospital room. And this is a matter of estate security," Thornton countered. "It has come to our attention that you've been making inquiries into the Ashford family trust and spreading allegations about Harrison and Constance Ashford's adoption practices. I'm here to advise you that such allegations could be considered defamatory, and any attempt to introduce a fraudulent heir to claim estate assets will be met with the full force of our legal resources." "Fraudulent heir?" Vincent's voice was dangerously quiet. "You mean my brother? My twin brother who Harrison abandoned so he could steal our inheritance?" Thornton's expression didn't flicker. "I mean the individual claiming to be Nathan Michael Thomas, who conveniently appeared after 3 decades with no verifiable history and no proof of identity beyond your word. DNA testing can be manipulated, Mr. Ashford. We have reason to believe this is an elaborate con designed to access the estate." Nathan struggled to sit up straighter, his face pale. "I'm not conning anyone. You're a homeless man with a criminal record and a history of mental health issues." Thornton cut him off coldly. "The courts will see you for exactly what you are, an opportunist trying to take advantage of a billionaire's midlife crisis." Vincent's control snapped. "Get out. Get out now, or I'll have security throw you out." "We'll be in touch, Mr. Ashford." Thornton's smile was razor sharp. "I suggest you think very carefully about your next moves. The Ashford estate has considerable resources and a very long memory. If you pursue this fiction, we will destroy both of you in court." She swept out, her associates following. The moment the door closed, Nathan sagged back against his pillows, his breathing labored. "Vincent, maybe this isn't worth it. Maybe we should just—" "No." Vincent's voice was absolute. "They don't get to win. Not again. They stole our childhood, Nathan. They stole 31 years we should have had together. They don't get to steal the truth, too." He pulled out his phone, dialing Marcus. "Get me the best family law attorney in the country. Get independent DNA testing from 3 separate labs. And prepare a press conference. We're going to war." As Vincent made his calls, Nathan watched his brother with a mixture of awe and fear. For the first time in his life, someone was fighting for him. Not because he could offer them something, not because they were paid to care, but because he mattered, because he was loved. And that terrified him more than any threat Margaret Thornton could make. The press conference took place 3 months later, in the grand ballroom of the New Haven Harbor Hotel. Vincent stood at the podium, Nathan beside him in a new suit that fit his now healthy frame, Clara and Patricia seated in the front row, alongside Marcus and the legal team. Cameras flashed as reporters jockeyed for position, sensing this was a story that would dominate headlines for months. Vincent looked out at the sea of faces, took a deep breath, and began. "Thank you all for coming. My name is Vincent Ashford, CEO of Ashford Industries. 3 months ago, I learned something that changed my life completely. I learned that I have a twin brother. His name is Nathan Michael Thomas, and he's standing beside me today." Vincent glanced at Nathan, who stood rigid but determined. "What I'm about to tell you is a story of greed, fraud, and a conspiracy that separated 2 brothers for 31 years. But it's also a story about the power of truth and the unbreakable bond of family." Over the next 40 minutes, Vincent laid out everything. The car accident that killed their biological parents. The fact that Michael Thomas was Jonathan Ashford's biological son, making them Jonathan's grandsons. Harrison and Constance's adoption of only one twin to control the trust fund. the discovery that they were entitled to equal shares of a billion-dollar inheritance. The evidence of fraud and falsified records. The DNA test results from 3 independent laboratories that proved beyond any doubt that he and Nathan were identical twins, and both were Jonathan Ashford's direct descendants. The reporters erupted with questions, but Vincent held up his hand. Nathan has agreed to share his story with you. After that, we'll take limited questions. Nathan stepped forward, his voice steady despite the trembling Vincent could feel in his brother's hand when they'd gripped each other's arms for support backstage. "I'm Nathan," he began simply. "For most of my life, I believed I was alone. I was 3 years old when my brother and I were separated. I remembered him, but everyone told me I was confused, that I'd imagined having a twin. I spent years in foster care, in group homes, and eventually on the streets. I tried to find Vincent when I was 26, but I couldn't get past the lobby of his office building. 5 years ago, I hired an investigator to locate him, and I was told he didn't want contact." Nathan's voice grew stronger. "I'm not sharing this for sympathy. I'm sharing it because there are thousands of children in the foster system right now who are being failed, the same way I was failed. Children who are separated from siblings for convenience or profit. Children whose identities are erased because it's easier than doing what's right. Children who age out of the system with nothing, no support, no family, no hope." He paused, looking directly at the cameras. "Harrison and Constance Ashford stole more than money from us. They stole our childhood together. They stole our parents' memory. They stole the bond that every twin should have. But they didn't break us. Vincent found me, and we're together now. And we're going to use our story to make sure this never happens to another child." The questions came rapid fire after that. Vincent and Nathan answered what they could, deflected what they couldn't. Margaret Thornton and the Ashford estate lawyers were notably absent, but Vincent knew they were watching. The legal battle that followed was brutal. The estate fought every claim, every piece of evidence, every document. They tried to prove the DNA tests were falsified, that Nathan was an imposter who'd undergone plastic surgery, that Vincent was having a psychological breakdown. They brought in psychiatrists to testify that Nathan's trauma made him an unreliable witness to his own past. But Vincent's legal team was relentless. They tracked down former employees of St. Margaret's who remembered the twins. They found the original social worker who'd processed their admission and who testified that separating them had violated policy. They uncovered the paper trail of Harrison's payments to suppress Nathan's identity. They produced Jonathan Ashford's private papers acknowledging Michael as his son and specifying DNA-verified descendants in the trust. And most damning of all, they found Doris Kent, the former orphanage director who'd accepted Harrison's bribes and convinced her to testify in exchange for immunity. The trial lasted 4 months. Every day, Vincent and Nathan sat side by side in the courtroom, presenting a united front. Clara and Patricia attended when they could, and Marcus coordinated security and media management. The public attention was overwhelming, but it also brought unexpected support. Foster children and former foster children reached out by the thousands, sharing their own stories of separation and loss. Advocacy groups rallied around Nathan's cause. The tide of public opinion turned decisively against the Ashford estate. On a cold February morning, Judge Patricia Morrison delivered her ruling. The courtroom was packed, standing room only, as she looked down from the bench at Vincent and Nathan. "This case," Judge Morrison began, her voice carrying through the silent room, "represents one of the most egregious examples of adoption fraud and estate manipulation I have encountered in 30 years on the bench. The evidence presented leaves no doubt that Harrison and Constance Ashford knowingly and deliberately separated identical twin brothers for financial gain, falsified adoption records, and suppressed the rights of one twin for over 3 decades. She paused, her gaze moving to Nathan. "Mr. Thomas, the court recognizes you as the biological grandson of Jonathan Ashford and the rightful heir to your portion of the family trust. Furthermore, this court finds that the Ashford estate knowingly withheld assets that rightfully belong to you. The trust is hereby ordered to immediately release $600 million to you, with additional damages to be calculated for the 31 years of wrongful suppression." Nathan's hand found Vincent's under the table, squeezing hard. Vincent squeezed back, both of them trying not to break down in the courtroom. Additionally, Judge Morrison continued, the court finds that Vincent Ashford's adoption, while obtained through fraudulent means by his adoptive parents, does not invalidate his own rights to his portion of the trust. Both brothers are entitled to equal shares, and the court condemns in the strongest possible terms the Ashford estate's attempts to portray Mr. Thomas as a con artist, when their own clients were the perpetrators of a multi-decade fraud. The gavel came down, and the courtroom erupted. Nathan turned to Vincent, tears streaming down his face, and for the first time in 31 years, the brothers embraced as free men. No more lies, no more stolen identity, no more separation. 4 months later, on a warm June evening, Vincent and Nathan stood together on the back lawn of a new property they'd purchased together, a sprawling estate in Guilford that would serve as both their shared home and the headquarters for the foundation they'd established. The Thomas Ashford Foundation for Foster Children had launched with an initial endowment of $500 million from Nathan's settlement, matched by Vincent's personal contribution. Their mission was simple but powerful: ensure no child in foster care would ever be separated from siblings, provide resources for family reunification, and support foster children aging out of the system with housing, education, and job training. Clara ran across the lawn with other children from the local foster care system, part of the foundation's first summer program. Patricia watched fondly from the porch, now employed as the foundation's director of family services. You know, Nathan said quietly, watching the children play. 10 months ago, I was sleeping in a warehouse, thinking my life was basically over. Now look at this. You did this, Vincent reminded him. Your courage in sharing your story, your willingness to fight even when it was terrifying. You gave these kids hope. We did it, Nathan corrected. Together. He held up his left wrist, showing the crescent moon birthmark that matched Vincent's. That's what twins do, right? Face the world together? Vincent smiled, bumping his shoulder against Nathan's in the easy, affectionate way they'd developed over months of living together and rebuilding their bond. Always have, always will. Marcus approached with Patricia, both carrying glasses of lemonade. Thought you two might be thirsty. Big day tomorrow. The governor's coming to tour the facility. Let him come, Nathan said with a grin that was becoming more frequent as he healed. We've got nothing to hide and everything to show. As the sun set over the property, casting golden light across the lawn where children played and laughed, Vincent thought about the journey that had brought them here. A little girl with a wicker basket and impossible courage, a photograph in a golden frame, a warehouse in the darkness. A truth that had been buried for 31 years but refused to stay hidden. Some bonds Vincent had learned couldn't be broken by lies or distance or time. The connection between twins was written in their DNA, in their shared heartbeat, in the mirror of each other's souls. Harrison and Constance Ashford had tried to sever that connection, but they'd failed. Because love, real love, the kind that bound brothers together, was stronger than any conspiracy. Hey, Nathan said softly, pulling Vincent from his thoughts. You getting all philosophical again? Maybe a little, Vincent admitted. Just thinking about how different things could have been. If Clara hadn't been brave enough to speak up, if you'd given up before I found you, if either of us had been a day later, a moment slower. But we weren't, Nathan interrupted gently. We found each other. Against impossible odds, we found each other. And now we get to spend the rest of our lives making up for lost time. He paused, then added with characteristic honesty, I still have nightmares sometimes. About being alone. About you disappearing again. Me too, Vincent confessed. But then I wake up and walk down the hall and you're right there, real, solid, home. Home, Nathan repeated, testing the word. Never really had that before. You have it now. We have it now. Vincent gestured to the house, the lawn, the foundation, all of it. This is our home, our family, our second chance. Clara ran up to them, breathless and beaming. Mr. Vincent, Mr. Nathan. We're going to play hide and seek, and you have to play too, Miss Patricia said. Nathan laughed, the sound free and genuine. Well, if Miss Patricia said so, come on, Vincent, let's show these kids how twins play hide and seek. Unfair advantage, Vincent protested, but he was already moving, following his brother and Clara across the lawn. As they played in the fading light, surrounded by children who were finding their own second chances, Vincent felt something settle in his chest. A piece he hadn't known was missing. A completeness he'd spent 35 years seeking without knowing what he was looking for. He'd found his brother. He'd found his purpose. He'd found his way home. And somewhere, he liked to think, their biological parents, Michael and Sarah Thomas, were watching and smiling. Their sons had been separated, lost, stolen from each other. But they'd found their way back. Against all odds, against all the forces that had tried to keep them apart, they'd found their way back to each other. The game of hide-and-seek continued as stars began appearing in the darkening sky. Nathan's laughter echoed across the lawn, a sound Vincent never tired of hearing. They'd lost 31 years, true, but they had the rest of their lives ahead of them, and this time nothing and no one would ever tear them apart again. Two brothers twice blessed, finally whole,